Right, so today we're testing an ECUmaster Black to IS200 plug and play unit. So let's get into it. Right, so as discussed, we are looking at an IS200 1G-FE ECUmaster Black plug and play patch harness. So right, so this is a complete plug and play unit. Doesn't require the standard ECU to be involved at all. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, we're going to cut through to some pictures now of what it looks like when it's all built, and in this case I'm going to throw in what it looks like when it's all complete. It's a bit difficult to see once we do all the testing over here, so let's do that now and we'll come back. Alright, so now you've seen all of that, we're going to jump into the testing and some explanation on the sub harnesses and how to install them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by explaining how to install all the sub harnesses, because it's quite a lengthy process, and then what I'll do is I'll move into all the testing that we are going to do. Alright, so here are all the little sub harnesses that you need to add in. So we've got our temperature sensor, so that is to fit a temperature sensor to the engine for the MPX device, and that's what's going to display the temperature on your dash. We then have, in this case, the customer's gone for a Bosch LSU 4.9 wideband sensor. So we've got this sub harness that needs to go in as well. And then finally, as he is turbocharging, we are fitting a Mach boost valve. So you can see we've got the Mach boost valve there, and we've got the little sub harness that needs to go with that. Right, so the one with the most wires is the Bosch LSU 4.9. So I'm going to start explaining that and how you install that. So first of all, what you want to know is on the one end, you've got your plug, and that's going to go straight into your Bosch LSU 4.9 wideband sensor. Then we've got the side that's going to go into the ECU, and there's the other one that is going to supply the power. So these are all labeled, so you can see WBO there, and then we've got the labels on here and where they are going to go. So you can see we've got 2827, 2817, and I'm going to explain those to you in a minute. All right, so this sub harness is going to form part of the body harness of the vehicle. It's going to come out the ECU box, go around the corner to the back, where it can then mount to your wideband sensor, which will be on that side of the car. That's where the exhaust is. Right, so how do you install it? So first of all, what you're probably going to want to do is loosen your ECU box. So you've got your bolt down there, and then you've got your bolt down there. Okay, not super necessary, just mega helpful. And also what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to release this white frame. So I'm just going to show you. I'm going to take a small little screwdriver. You're going to push it in there like so. I'm going to try and get it in camera, and you can see that you can just pull that little frame out, and then this whole white frame is going to pop out. So I'll just do that for you now so you can see. Okay, boom. That's going to pop out there. And then lastly, you've got the other one, which is over there. So you're just going to pop that out over there. And then that's going to pop up over there. So that is now going to loosen your white frame, which is going to allow you access to where you need to get to. Okay, you can obviously remove the whole white frame if you want to by just unclipping these plugs. So if you have a look down here, you'll see there's a little clip over there which holds the gray one in, and there's a little clip underneath which holds the black one in, and same with the blue one over there. There's a little clip over there, and then you can push the blue one down. All right, so for this particular sub harness, because it's going to form part of the body harness, so in other words, it's not going to be associated with the engine harness, which is obviously these two plugs over here. What you're going to do is you're going to have a look underneath your ECU box, and you're going to see you've got this rubber grommet over here. You're going to have to slice a little hole in there, okay? And then you're going to push through all of this end where all of the ECU terminals are, as well as this section over here. Okay, so you saw in the pictures what it looks like when it's down, and this section is long, and it's 2 meters long, so plenty of length to reach all around. But what you're going to do is you're going to push these all through this rubber grommet over here. They're going to come up the top over here. And then, as I said, these are all labeled, so you can see they're labeled like 2817, 2825. So what that means is your 28 pin plug over here, which is part of your body plug. You've got open spaces where you can put these terminals in. So there shouldn't be any wires in where you're going to put these in. So all you're basically going to do is you're going to lift up the plug. You're going to lift out the secondary lock, which just put a screwdriver in and just lift it away. It goes about 1 millimeter, and then you're free to push these in. So they do go in smoothly. So if it is not going in smoothly, flip it 180 degrees and try and push the terminal in like that. Okay. And as I said, really nice and simple. So you've got 2817, so plug 28 pin 17. You've got plug 28 pin 25. You've got plug 28 pin 16. Plug 28 pin 27 and plug 28 pin 15. Okay, so those are those 5 that are going to go into the ECU over there. Now this one over here, this one is going to end up in the black plug, but not on the top here, underneath at the bottom. So underneath this plug is exactly the same plug. In your case, it will be black. So it's black on the top, black on the bottom. And as you see here, it is labeled as black 8. Hopefully you can see it there. Okay, so you lift up the white frame so you can see the plug underneath, and then what you're going to do is you're going to be faced with the plug exactly like this. You're then going to see that directly underneath this one over here on the other side over there. So I'll see if I can ever so gently lift it up. Yep, so you see down there, you can see the black plug over there, which you can unplug over there. Now, to read the numbers on the plug, this is number 1, so clip at the top. This is number 1, looking at the back of the plug. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that is black 8. So it should be open, and it should have a red with a blue wire next to it. And that's where this is going to go. So that's the 12 volts for the wideband sensor, okay? So that's where it's getting its 12 volts from. And that is going into the ECU, which then communicates with the ECU master. Okay, so nice and simple. All right, so that's how you install that. And like I said, because it goes into the body plug and the underside of this plug, it doesn't form part of the engine harness. So if you were to pull the engine out, you could unplug these 2 plugs, unplug these 3 body plugs from the top, pull it out, and this will stay behind. So you can hard mount it along here, along the back over there, and over to the other side to go to your wideband. Okay, so that is that. Hopefully that's relatively straightforward. Now, the temperature one, so remember our little analog device requires its own temperature sensor to work. So you need to fit a temperature sensor on the engine somewhere, and this is the wire that you're going to take it to. So again, exactly the same principle. It's going to form part of the body harness, because as you can see here on the ECU plug, it's labeled as 28 pin 7. Okay, so exactly the same. So the same hole that you make here to put the wideband through, that's where you're going to take this through as well. You're going to push it up. It's going to go over across here. And then as you can see, actually literally that red one that's sticking out there, that is number 7. So again, there should be no wire in pin number 7 of your 28 pin plug. That's where this is going to go. And the other end, we've put a little terminal on there, okay, and that you can then put into, you can either use the terminal if you can get a Toyota sensor to fit. If you can't, you can just cut that off and you can put it to whatever sensor you want. So do remember that the MPX device, the temperature input is completely calibrated, so you can set it to how you want. So I do have a video on that, and I will stick it up in the corner there so you know how to do that. But that's how you install that. And again, you're going to come out here at the bottom here, and you can hardwire it into the vehicle. So you can bring it all the way down here. If you have the ability to put a temperature sensor in your radiator, you can do that. I'm not too sure on the 1Gs because I don't have one in the workshop here. But on the 2JZ, what's quite nice is you've got your temperature sensor, right? That is for the ECU, and I think it's in a similar position on the 1G on the cylinder head here. And if you look slightly to the right, on a normal 2JZ GE VVT-i engine, specifically on the IS200, GS200, you have like a little brass blanking blanking cap over here, or bolt that goes in there. Now you can see I've actually fitted a JZX100 coolant temp sensor. So I unscrewed that and I screwed that one in. So this is obviously a legacy item left over in the casting. So basically for the modern vehicles where they transmit the coolant temp via MPX, they've obviously blanked that off. So there very well may be a hole next to the coolant temp sensor on the 1G that would allow you to fit another coolant temp sensor. So do have a look at that. And if anybody else knows whether there's another spot on a 1G where you can fit it, let us know so we can let our customers know and go from there. Okay, so that is the temp sensor. Now then, we're going to move on to the Mac boost valve. Now this one is actually going to form part of the engine harness. Now what I mean by that is if you look at our ECU connection over here, that is 24 pin plug, pin number 10. So your 24 pin plug is this one over here. So you got 31, you got 24. So again, pin number 10 of the 34 pin plug will not have a wire in it in your particular case. So you are going to again pull the plug out, pop the secondary lock out, slide this in, push the lock in and plug it back in again. Okay, so that's this one over here. So that's the small ECU terminal that's on there. This bigger one is labeled as BLK or Black 9. Now because this is forming part of the engine harness, okay, you're going to be using the top of the plug. Okay, so this side of the plug, not the underside, this side of the plug. And what you're going to do, again, exactly the same procedure. You're going to unclip this one, which I can do now for you actually. You see the white frame? You're going to put a screwdriver in there. You're going to pop it up. It should come up about a millimeter and a half. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take the Black 9. And remember, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right? So bottom row, third one along, that's number 9. You're going to push it straight into there. Okay, then the rest of the harness is going to make its way out along your engine harness, and you can take it over the top to the other side there and fit the Mac boost valve right by the turbo, or you can take it pretty much wherever you want, wherever you're going to run your vacuum pipes for your Mac boost valve. Okay, so Mac boost valve, part of the engine harness. Okay, wideband will now form part of the body harness, so it's going to come through the bottom of the ECU box and out through that way. All right. Coolant temp sensor, again, part of the body harness, so it's going to come down through the rubber grommet out into the engine bay. Okay, so basically what we're doing to keep it plug and place, you don't have to mess around with anything, is basically we're using unused pin allocations in these 4 plugs that will allow us to add on extras. We do still have the ability to add on like a fuel pressure and oil pressure and all of that type of stuff as well. So if you guys do want to add that stuff in later, you can just let us know and we'll make you a harness pretty much similar to this, because in the plugs here in the body, we've got 5-volt sensor ground, and then we've got a couple of allocations for extras that go in there. They're already wired into the ECU, so there's no need to make any changes to this harness. We just need to add it in from the top. All right. Okay, so that is that section done. So again, hopefully that's relatively straightforward. You just have to add it into the ECU box, plug it in, and then plug in your wideband there. You just got to push the one wire up into there, bring the other one down, either bring it around to the block, into the pipe of the radiator, or wherever you're going to get your coolant temp sensor signal from. Your Mac is going to come through the grommet there, clip into the ECU and the black plug, and then make its way around to wherever you want to do it. These are quite long. I think they're all 2 meters long, so you should have plenty of length to reach wherever you want to reach. Obviously, we'd like to give you guys as much freedom as you can to mount everything where you want to mount it. Okay, so those are the little sub harnesses. That is how they wire into the vehicle. And that is so, obviously, some guys will want the Mac, some won't. Some will want the Bosch, some won't. Everyone will come with the Temp one, because obviously you need that for the box to make the dash work. And obviously I'm going to show you when we do the testing for that as well, that obviously that does work exactly as we expect it to. Okay, right, so any questions about that, Samppa, please let us know. I'll try and explain it to you in more detail. But hopefully this video is enough explanation for you to get that in and dusted. All right. So moving on to the testing now, there's a few things that we are going to test down. Obviously, I cannot start the engine. I do not have a 1G, and unfortunately, I don't really foresee me buying a 1G. If anyone's got one for free they want to donate so they can see these things start up, by all means give us a shout. We'll take it off your hands. But for now, we're just going to do all the testing through here. We're going to be feeding RPM signals and so on. You'll notice things like coils and injectors I haven't got on here. Now, we do obviously test it as part of our harness. So you can see we've got coil 1 to 6 over there. We do have injector 1 to 6 over here as little LEDs. When I feed the RPM signal, you'll see those going off, but I'm not going to go and actually in the ECU and test all the outputs. What I will do at the end of the video, I'm going to put a link at the end screen to all of our ECU Master tutorials that'll actually show you how to test the outputs. So once you get it, Samppa, if you want to test all your outputs before you fire everything up, in that string of videos there is how to do that as well for you there. Okay, in your case, it is obviously all set up. We've got a base map which we have run on a 1G, so this should be ready pretty much to start inside your vehicle. Just bearing in mind, always check the base timing. So that means checking the timing on the engine against the ECU. I do have a video on how to do that, so I'll just put a link up in the top there. Obviously, the settings that we've put in your ECU should be correct, but assume nothing. Always check that information, and that goes for any ECU. It doesn't matter if somebody told you, oh, I've already set it up, it should be okay. Always, always, always verify. All right, so that's that out of the way. Right, so what we're going to be doing basically is turning on the ignition, as it's a plug and play, so it should turn straight on from your key. We're going to start by going over to the climate control over there, making sure that our ambient temp is displaying 18 degrees because it should display 18 degrees all the time. Our analog device is not sensing the ambient temperature. Now, what we have done is we have actually connected the ambient temp sensor inside the ECU. So in this particular case, if you look at pre-intercooler temp sensor, that's actually your ambient temp sensor in there. Now, the reason we've done this is because we are still working on a CAN to MPX device. Once we get that sorted out, then obviously we'll be able to then send the ambient temperature to the ECU Master ECU, which will then be able to output it to the dash over there. But for now, we've got it there, but we have put that all in for when we do eventually get around to doing that, okay? So you guys can upgrade to that if you want to. Right, then we're going to check the check engine light because that is controlled via the ECU, so that should come on with the ignition. We're going to check the oil pressure. Now what we're going to do with that is we've got our little wire here labeled oil. Okay, so that is going to the oil pressure switch that's on your engine. So we're going to ground that out like your oil pressure switch would, and we'll see the oil light come on the dash. Right, coolant temp sensor. So as I said, it's going to pin number 7 of the 28 pin plug. So I've got my loose wire here just to imitate that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ground that out, because what you'll notice is when I turn the key on, the temperature gauge is going to shoot to straight hot. Okay, so one of the things with the MPX converter device is if it detects no connection on coolant temp, its default position is to full hot. Okay, so if it goes full hot on your cluster, just make sure that the connection hasn't gone right. Obviously kill the car just in case it has overheated, but in any case, check your wiring and make sure that it hasn't broken. So obviously this little temp wire, or maybe your actual temp sensor itself is broken. Okay, but that's how I'm going to test it. As soon as I touch it on ground, you're going to see the temp gauge make its way down. Okay, then what I'm going to do is, obviously we've got the laptop up here, so I've got literally all the sensors connected, and more specifically I'm looking at the intake air temperature sensor. So that's your standard IS200 intake air temperature sensor. Now obviously this will already be on your harness and fitted into your box. If you do decide to change anything, by all means you can just cut off the plug for this and you can fit whatever intake air temperature sensor you want. Vice versa, same goes for this. These sensors are pretty cheap enough to replace, but if you do want to change the coolant temp sensor for something else, again, same story. You can just cut off your existing plug and swap it over to whatever you want. Okay, so these are all things that you can do. Obviously, if you want to return the vehicle back to standard again, I would advise against that, because you've got to change it all the way back again if you wanted to do that. These sensors do seem to work, but you might want to relocate the sensor and have a sensor that screws in, or at least you can weld a Bosch in and obviously make that work. So you could have a setup sort of something like this, you know, with a Bosch fast response air intake sensor. I can supply these with aluminium or steel mounting bosses. So if you're changing all your pipe work, just let me know, and then we can supply you with the sensor and the plug and everything, and you can weld the fitting into your intake pipe, and then obviously replace that sensor with that. All right, so but what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to unplug these one at a time, and then you're obviously going to see the coolant temp down here and the IAT temp down there. They're going to go to their error value because they are disconnected. Okay, right, so that's the coolant and the intake air temperature sensor. I'm going to go through and explain the AC setup, obviously how we've got it working and how it's going to work in your case. Just in case you need to change anything, I'm going to explain to you how that works so it's not confusing. And then the ACIS setup, first of all, I'm going to explain exactly how it works with the diagram from Toyota, and then I'm going to show you how we get it to work on this setup. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed the tach. I'm going to imitate a crank sensor signal and a cam sensor signal, which will then cause an RPM on the ECU, and then we should see the dash give us a tach reading as well, which will corroborate with what we're seeing on the ECU itself. And then lastly, obviously we've done all the drive-by-wire, so I'm just going to show you that that is actually working. Okay, this is a 1UZ VVT-i throttle, but it's the exact same system as a 1G. With the drive-by-wires, no matter what happens, when you get a new system, and this applies to all ECUs, you do need to calibrate your particular drive-by-wire sensor to that, because things like the TPS can be adjusted. And so if that's the case, you want to always calibrate yours to match yours to make sure that everything is correct. And again, at the end, I've got all those ECUmaster videos, and in there is how to set up drive-by-wire, which I think includes how to calibrate it as well. Okay, right, so what I'm going to do now, we're going to jump over to the other side. I'm going to put the key on, and then we're going to start rolling down those little tests. So as it's plug and play, key in the car, ignition on. So the first thing we're going to do is ambient temperature. So I'm going to come along here, and you're going to see there 18 degrees, right? So that's going to always display 18 degrees. Remember, if you're in Fahrenheit, it's whatever the equivalent Fahrenheit of 18 degrees is. Okay, so that's fine. So we're happy with that. Next up, we want check engine light. So as you can see on the dash there, we do have the check engine light working. So that's exactly as we expect. Oil pressure light. So I need to get my little oil wire here, and what I'm going to do is I am just going to ground it out. So as I ground it out, so you see there in the corner, there's your oil light. Okay, let's ground it out again. On, off. Right, so that's cool. So we know that the oil light is going to work inside your car. Coolant temp, so again, exactly the same. So as you can see on the dash, the coolant temp is shot all the way to hot. I'm going to quickly ground out that wire that I was speaking about, and you'll see the temperature shoots down to low. As I let go, shoots back up again. Okay, so super happy with that. I know that the correct pin, which is 7 of the 28 pin plug, goes to the coolant temp sensor, and it makes that work as it should do. All right, now then, going on to the coolant temp sensor and the intake air temp sensor. So you can see down here, I've got the coolant temp and the intake air temp sensor. Now, if you ever get an ECU setup and you plug it in for the first time and the engine's ice cold, coolant temp and IAT are probably going to be within a few degrees of each other just based on the sensor. But if one's way different than the other, then just check the calibration for your sensors on there to make sure. Sometimes it's quite nice just to do a little sanity check. If these are way apart, something is definitely wrong there. Okay, right, so basically it's nice and simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the sensors, and as I do, you're going to see that the values are going to fall to the error value. Okay, so let me just, that's plugged in. That's the coolant temp sensor. So I've unplugged that now, and you see coolant has diverted to 80 degrees. So that's the error value for the coolant temp sensor. Okay, I'm going to plug it back in again. Let's plug that back in again, and you see that it drops down. So you see, even just me holding the sensor in my hand is sensitive enough to make it rise temperature. Right, so let's move on to the intake air temperature sensor. So again, I'm just going to disconnect it. And obviously it's a super easy plug to disconnect. So I've just disconnected that, and you can see that is reverted to 25 degrees. And as soon as I plug it in, so plug that back in again. and you'll see it's come back down to 21 degrees. Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to go into engine protection. I'm just going to show you guys where that is. Okay, so under engine protection, there's a thing called failsafe. And what happens is these are the values that you can set for the map, the coolant temp, and the IAT. Okay, so set these values to where you want to. So as an example, I think Toyota, okay, you can't go that low, but Toyota set their values as -40. In this case, we'll go -30. We'll save that to the ECU. So remember, all the changes you make, you need to save in there. And then just to show you, at the moment we got 21 and 20 degrees. But now if I disconnect the coolant temp sensor, you'll see it diverts to -30. Okay, so speak to your tuner about how you want to set that up, because obviously bearing in mind, if this fail safe's at -30 degrees, it's going to shove the ECU into like, if they've got any sort of coolant based fueling enrichments, that's going to throw it off like that. So he might want to leave it at 80 degrees so the engine carries on running as normal, whereas you might want to put it into that so you'll suddenly see, oh, it starts running really rich and your temperature will shoot up to there. So that's a discussion between you and your tuner and how you want to set that up, but that is how you set that up. Okay, right, so that is the coolant and the intake air temperature sensor. Right, now we're going to go into the air conditioning setup. So the air conditioning is fully functioning with this plug and play kit. It also has the safeties built in, so it is utilizing the pressure switch, right? What we do in this particular case is on the IS200s, they only use an aircon compressor or aircon pressure switch. So it's either on or off. It doesn't give you a reading. Now, what you'll know from the ECUmasters, if you want to use the proper AC clutch setup, you need to have a sensor that actually reads pressure, right? So how do we get around this? What we basically do is we know we've got the feed from the pressure switch, so that is fine. We do have that information. Our little MPX box gives out a ground when the AC request is received from the vehicle. So we have those two values. So this is basically what we do. So we use a parametric output, which I've got set up over here. I've named it EC. It's outputting auxiliary 3 to the AC magnetic clutch relay. So it will activate the relay when the conditions are met. So the conditions are that switch 1 is on, aka going to ground, and switch 2 is on, aka going to ground. So the aircon will not work unless the pressure switch goes to ground, which indicates that the pressure is either not too high or too low. It's just right. And then obviously when you press the AC button in the car, our little white box converts the MPX data and outputs a signal to the ECU to say, hey, I want aircon. Okay, so I'm going to show you that now. So if you have a look down here, we've got, and I do apologize, I have set up switch 2 and switch 2, which isn't going to help us a lot. But we've got switch 1, which is the pressure, and that's showing 1, which means it's on. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to press the AC button. Now listen closely. You're going to hear the actual relay clicking. All right, maybe you heard that. Let's go back around to the ECU. And there you go. Now we've got switch 2 is 1. So that means our auxiliary 3, which is the AC magnetic clutch relay, is now active. Okay. Now we have put a third event that would cause it to go on, and in this case I've said the TPS needs to be equal or lower than 90%. So that means that although it's on now, if I was to open up the TPS more than 90%, it would turn off. So I'm going to open the drive-by-wire and you're going to hear the relay click as I get to 90%. So bear with me. Can you hear that? Right. So although the AC request is active, although the pressure is active, as soon as I turn the TPS more than 90%, the aircon will turn off. Why have we done that? Well, if you put your foot down, so you've got more than 90% throttle, you're obviously trying to move somewhere quickly, you turn the AC off so you remove that parasitic draw. Now then, if you want to remove that, by all means, you can just remove the third logical operator, or you can change it to whatever you want. Maybe it's at a specific RPM you want it to turn off. Again, feel free to set that up exactly how you like. Right. So that is the AC setup. We've pressed the button. We know it works. Super happy with that. ACIS. Right. So ACIS, or Acoustic Control Induction System. Now, I do have a video on Acoustic Control Induction System. It's based on the UZs, but the principle still applies. Okay. Now then, what do we need to do? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the document from Toyota. Okay, so it's a little valve inside your intake which effectively shortens the intake runner length. Okay, so as we know, longer runner length, more torque, shorter runner length, more horsepower. So that's what they're aiming for here. All right, now then, how is it controlled? This is where it gets weird. So in this little crosshatch section here, that is when the IACV is closed or the vacuum solenoid valve is on, right? So basically the regions where it's on is as long as the throttle position is below 60%, or it's between 2,500 and 4,900 RPM. Right, so how are we taking care of that in the ECU? What we're basically doing is we're using a parametric PWM output. Now with PWM outputs, 100 is fully on, 0 is fully off. And what you can see is I've basically recreated that little table over there. Okay, so you can see down here we've got 4,900 RPM, we've got 2,500 RPM, and down at the bottom here we've got 0 to 100% of TPS. So down there is 60. So you can see anywhere, if they're anywhere below 60% TPS, the vacuum solenoid valve is on exactly like Toyota wanted, and that little section between 2,400 and 4,900 RPM, it is also on as long as the throttle position is above 60%. Now, is that the best setup to make the most power? Probably not. Everything with the manufacturer is a compromise of some degree. So with this table over here, you can reset all of these RPM values, you can reset all of these TPS values, and if your tuner wants to spend a bit of time and see exactly where it's going to make you the most power, he can then play around with that table over there. Okay, so that's how the ACIS works. Also an explanation of what the system is doing on a standard vehicle, if anybody wanted to know. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to force feed a crank signal to the ECU, which is then going to cause us to have an RPM, which is then going to cause our dash to show a tacho signal. So I'm just going to grab my little device here, little homemade device that does that for me. Hang on a second. Right, so let me put it into test mode. Right, so I'm going to grab my crank and cam, which I've got here. So that is cam. No, sorry, that is cam. Let me find my crank sensor quickly. Should be here. There it is. Right, so just bear with me a minute. Just going to feed that in. You can actually hear the fuel pump kicking in as well. As soon as I do that. Okay, I do apologize, bit of technical difficulties with the laptop there, but you can see we've got synchronization, we're showing an RPM value, and most importantly, on the dash, you can see that we have our RPM signal, and obviously our check engine light's gone off because it is assuming the engine is running and it is super happy. You can also actually see all of our injectors firing away there, which is also pretty cool. Right, okay, so now that that is done, I'm just going to remove this from the system. Okay, and the last thing on our list is obviously the drive-by-wire. So again, we've already calibrated it, we've plugged everything in, so I'm just going to turn the accelerator position sensor, and as you can see, it is working exactly as we expect it to. Okay. Right, so hopefully this is helpful for your installation of it. If anybody else might find it useful as well, a lot of useful information there for you about 1Gs and so on and so forth. But Samppa, let's get this all boxed up and get it off to you. Everybody else that's watching, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask below in the comments. We try to get to them as much as we can. Or you can find us on Facebook at Phoenix Engine Management. Obviously, these are readily available. And do bearing in mind that these black boxes, which we do sell separately, are capable of running a 1UZ, a 1G, a 2JZ, GT, a GE VVT-i from a GS300, which shares that same header. Also a 2JZ GTE, so from an Aristo, as well as, did I say a 1UZ? Oh, a JZS 171 or a JZX 110. So if you guys are wanting to make your own patch harnesses using that box, again, feel free, give us a shout. We can sell you the box, the Super Seal connectors on the other side, and we'll give you the entire pinout of the Super Seal connectors to tell you where everything is connected to on your JZS 171, JZX 110, or all the other variations that I've shown you there. So again, if you guys want more information on that, please get in touch with us and we can supply you those on their own. We do also supply them with patches for the ECU Master Black, for Link, for Haltech, for all of those various engines as well. Okay, so again, thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully it's been helpful. Samppa, we're going to get it in the box, get it off to you, but we will see you guys again in the not too distant future. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.